Hi folks, so let's carry on with A Christmas Carol. You should now be on page 4. Now remember we've finished last video just looking at the end of beginning of page 4, so we'll start from here. Uncle, pleaded the nephew. Nephew, returned Uncle sternly, keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mind. Keep it, repeated Scrooge's nephew, but you don't keep it. Let me leave it alone then, said Scrooge. Much good may it do you. Much good has it ever done you. Now here there's quite a few interesting bits of language. We see the nephew pleading with Uncle. So we've got this sense of desperation. And he's unwilling to give up here. He keeps trying. So this is where we see Fred being determined and being resilient in his approach to Scrooge and his desperation to try and change his mind. But Scrooge is having none of it. He's stern with him. This adverb here telling us that he's stern. So, really cold and pushing him away. And the point that Scrooge's nephew Fred is making is saying, well, you don't keep Christmas. Like, to keep something means, like to sort of celebrate it. And he's saying that you don't celebrate it. And then Fred's response is here. Again, he won't let it drop. And he's got this sort of dogged determination. There are many things from which I might have derived good, but which I have not profited, I dare say, returned the nephew. So he's using this kind of financial language and turning it back on Scrooge. So he's saying, look, you can benefit from something, you can derive good from something, this idea of benefiting from something, even if it doesn't benefit you financially. Okay, so he's trying to make this point to his uncle that things can do you good even if they don't do your wallet good, even if they don't do your finances good. And he says that Christmas is one of those. Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time when it has come round, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin. So he's saying we should like to venerate something, is to kind of really respect it and hold it up high, because it's a religious festival. So obviously Fred is religious. If anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. So here we get into the meaning of Christmas. It is a time of being kindness, of a time of forgiveness, of charity. So this is a really key quotation here about the meaning of Christmas. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year. So this is really important. It's the only time, it's the long calendar year, but building up this suspense, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, not one another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good and will do me good, and I say God bless it. So let's look at this idea here. Christmas is when men and women by one consent, if you consent to something, you agree to it. So we've got a sense of humankind, men and women, all of society in agreement to open their shut-up hearts freely. Now your heart is not a box or something. So again, this is a kind of metaphor here that we've got. Hearts cannot be shut up. But if they're opening their hearts, we've got themselves like opening their hearts to each other. So this metaphor is suggesting that people are more open at Christmas. They're more kind. They're more giving. And that everyone is in agreement, this idea of consent, meaning agreement in terms of doing this. And they do this not against their will, but they do it freely. They choose to do it. So Christmas is this time of everyone being loving and kind and giving and sharing and charitable and so on and so on. And obviously we know that was particularly important in Victorian England where there wasn't a welfare system and the poor were particularly dependent on the individual generosity of the rich to provide for them. So if people like Scrooge don't enter into the spirit of Christmas, then really a lot of other people are going to suffer. And he says really the rest of the time we're like a race of creatures bound on other journeys, so we're kind of oblivious to each other, or we're not accepting of each other, or we're distant, I guess. So bound on other journeys suggests that we're kind of distant from each other, and we have different motivations and different reasons, and don't kind of are less accepting of each other. But at Christmas time we are fellow passengers. We're in this together. And so this kind of word fellow here is giving us this sense of togetherness. So when we talk about Christmas being a time for family, we don't just mean like our family, but the human race as a family together. The clerk in the tank, now remember that's Bob Cratchit, involuntarily applauded. So he agrees with Fred, but he does this kind of involuntary. He doesn't want to do it because he knows he could lose his job really for saying something that Scrooge disagrees with. Becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, if you do something the impropriety like improper, he's doing something that is wrong, and he suddenly realises he's doing something wrong. He poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. And this really is reflecting the mood here. It suddenly is going cold and dark, because Scrooge is not going to like what Fred has just said. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation." Again, so we've got this sense of him, real threat here. He's gonna fire a guy on Christmas Eve, just because he clapped when someone said something that he liked. "You're quite a powerful speaker, sir," he added, turning to his nephew. "I wonder you don't go into Parliament." "Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow." And again, we see these imperatives here. He will not give up here, Fred. He doesn't get angry at Scrooge. He doesn't stoop to his level. He really embodies the Christmas spirit here. So I think that might be a nice thing to note down as well. We see Fred embodies the Christmas spirit. And I guess here this is an interesting play on words, isn't it? Because we're going to see three spirits later, these idea of ghosts, but the Christmas spirit here is kind of play on words, meaning the mood of Christmas, the feeling of Christmas. Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed he did. He went the whole length of the expression and said that he would see him in that extremity first. "But why?" cried Scrooge's nephew. "Why?" "Why did you get married?" said Scrooge. "Because I fell in love." "Because you fell in love?" growled Scrooge, as if that were the only one thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. "Good afternoon." So he means this like he's basically saying good day, and shutting him out. And again, let's just pick out on these some interesting words here, kind of making Scrooge seem kind of animalistic here. "Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?" And this is just an interesting line, I think, that Fred says. He's not asking for anything. He doesn't want for anything. "I want nothing." And this makes him, again, it's a contrast. He's the antithesis, remember that word, meaning opposite, of Scrooge. And Scrooge just wants more all the time. Fred wants nothing apart from friendship. And maybe that's why Scrooge can't understand it. Can't understand him, really. "I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas. I mean, it's like in Christmas's namesake, in respect to Christmas. And I'll keep my Christmas humour to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "And a Happy New Year." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. So again, we see him all the way to the end. Scrooge is resolute. If you're resolute, you've made up your mind. You've decided. And so we see Scrooge here being very inflexible. and unwilling to change. So in the same way that we saw him being very unapproachable to others earlier, he's now essentially unapproachable really for his nephew, but his nephew is so determined he just kind of ignores him. Alright, page 5. His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding. He stomped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. And so again we've got this kind of play on words here. Cold as Bob was, he's warmer than Scrooge. So he's physically cold, but he's warmer than Scrooge emotionally. There's another fellow, muttered Scrooge, who overheard him. My clerk with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family talking about a merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam. Now, Bedlam was a mental hospital, and what he's saying here is 15 shillings a week would have been not a lot of money, and Scrooge is basically saying he can't believe that with not very much money and with a wife and family to support, that Bob has anything to be merry about. Can't sort of disbelief really, and saying that he might as well be in a mental hospital. He finds the situation so ridiculous. This lunatic, in letting, so he's talking about Bob now, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were the portly gentlemen. Okay, so we know these 2 are really important. I would write at the top here, just as a little reminder, the portly gentlemen. Nice and big at the top of your page, so that when you're trying to find that section, you can find it really easily. You might even want to write on the previous top of the previous page Fred, because that's what that bit is all about. So I'm just doing that now, but obviously you can't see it. I don't move that over. So that page was all about Fred. Now we're moving on to this bit being all about the portly gentleman. Scrooge and Marley's, I believe, said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years, Scrooge replied. He died 7 years ago this very night. We have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner. So liberality is another way of saying generosity. It certainly was, for they had been 2 kindred spirits. And really what the narrator is saying here is, yes, Marley's generosity is represented by surviving partner. His lack of generosity, essentially, is what they were both so alike. At the ominous word liberality, Scrooge frowned and shook his head and handed the credentials back. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at this present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. So it's very emotive, this little bit here. I'm not going to sort of pick out on that too much. There's kind of emotive language here, trying to encourage Scrooge to be charitable. Are there no prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying his pen down again. And the Union workhouses? Demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? They are. Still, returned the gentleman, I wish I could say they were not. The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigour, then? Said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid from what you said first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, returned the gentleman, a few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? So let's look at these ideas here. Where want is keenly felt. So remember this idea of want, we've got almost a capital S. This is not like I want a PS3 or PS4 or whatever. This is a sense of being in need, like in want of something. So really it means in need. And saying that this is particularly felt at this time of year, where other people is more sense of abundance. Abundance means having a lot of something. And if so saying, whilst we're thinking about being abundant and having lots of food and drink and money and whatever it is, maybe we need to think about those who are really in need of something. And I would say this is still the message of Christmas now, isn't it? This has not changed. And so there's a message here for us as modern readers of this story, that this is a reminder that Christmas time is a time to think of others. But let's see what Scrooge thinks. Scrooge says, are there no prisons? So Scrooge really believes that, prisons, that's where people should go. And they would lock people up. They would have had debtors' prisons and things like that. So we're not necessarily talking about people who have committed a crime. But just like Dickens, his own father went to debtors' prison. This could be saying, well, if they've done something wrong, or they haven't got any money, or they're in debt, then they should go to prison. And the workhouses. So again, he's saying that if people can't afford to look after themselves, they should go to the workhouses, despite the fact that we know what dreadful conditions they were. And actually, we see that with the gentleman. He says, I wish I could say they were not. So this is kind of Dickens' way of saying how sort of emphasising the conditions. So we see Dickens' viewpoint coming through here, knowing that the workhouses were not up to scratch really, and all the way through this, these portly gentlemen are almost being Dickens's mouthpiece really. So you might want to put that back up at the top where you've written portly gentleman, and you've got a bit more room. So you can put Dickens's mouthpiece. And what I mean is these characters are literally speaking the words that Dickens would want people to say. This is Dickens's own message, isn't he? He is writing the story in the same vein as the portly gentleman. This is his him as the charity worker, kind of giving this story to the masses to say, this is the message about Christmas. We should think about others more, and trying to thaw the frozen hearts of people like Scrooge. So Scrooge there is symbolic and representing all kind of rich, greedy men in Victorian society. Okay, I should have highlighted them. So they're kind of key quotations when he's saying, are there no prisons, and the workhouses and the poor law and all of that. Nothing, Scrooge replied. You wish to remain and not to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make myself merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. So again, idle means lazy. There's a suggestion that he thinks these people are lazy. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. So this is how bad they were, that people would rather die than go there. If they would rather die, said Scrooge, they had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. So this is how cruel he is, that he is saying, look, he knows that the population has massively increased, and he knows that that's creating a problem. It's leaving us with a surplus. That means too many. But he's using financial language here. And when words fit together in a group, we can call it a semantic field. And so semantic field is words that kind of can be grouped together based on their theme, based on their topic. So these words all have a very kind of financial feel. We wouldn't normally talk using this kind of language. You'd say he just wants the population to go down. So this shows his kind of his obsession really with money, that he doesn't see people, he sees them as numbers. Or figures on a spreadsheet kind of thing, not individuals. And I'll move that up so you can see what I've written. So what I'm saying here is, these words decrease, surplus, create a financial semantic field, which shows that Scrooge sees people as numbers and figures. He doesn't see them as individuals. And look at the way he speaks as well. I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, these personal pronouns here really showing his selfishness. And we also see when he says, I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. Now remember, in Victorian England, people would have been dependent on the generosity of the rich. There was no safety net from the government. And so Scrooge does contribute to a small amount, but he's sort of refusing to do any more. And we've already seen this kind of attitude from him, his lack of flexibility and his unwillingness to change or do anything extra. Okay, let's turn over. It's not my business, Scrooge returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Now, we might sort of say this as well, this kind of line that we've still got now, it's not your business. He doesn't want to get involved. It's not my business. So he is just in denial, isn't he? Denial of others' problems. And his refusal to help, really. And again, we see this kind of interesting play on words, because actually he's saying business as in this is not to do with me, but also what he means is his actual business, and that's all he cares about, because his business is his way of making money. But essentially, he cares about this to such an extent that he has isolated himself from the whole of society. And as we know from the film, he's even sort of cut himself off from his future wife because of his obsession with business. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue the point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labours with improved opinion of himself. In a more facetious temper than was usual to him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that people ran about with flaring lamps, proffering their services to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible, and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there. The cold became intense. In the main street at the corner of the court some labourers were repairing the gas pipes, and had lighted a great fire in a brazier, round which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. The water plug being left in solitude, its overflowing sullenly congealed and turned to misanthropic ice. The brightness of the shops where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Poulterers' and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant, with which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sale had anything to do. The Lord Mayor in the stronghold of the mighty mansion, The Lord Mayor in the stronghold of the mighty mansion house gave orders to his 50 cooks and butlers to keep Christmas as a Lord Mayor's household should, and even the little sailor whom he'd fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloodthirsty in the streets, stirred up tomorrow's pudding in his garret, while his lean wife and the baby sallied out to buy the beef. Foggier yet, and colder. Piercing, searching, biting cold. If the good St. Dunstan had but nipped the evil nose with a touch of such weather as that, instead of using his familiar weapons, then indeed he would roar to lusty purpose. The owner of one scant young nose, gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. But at the first sound of "God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay," Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congenial frost. Okay, let's go back and have a look at all of that. Alright, so the first thing I want you to do is draw a big line in between where it says usual with him and meanwhile the fog, because here we've got to change to the description of London, and this description of London is really key because it's quite symbolic. It has a deeper meaning. So we've got this description of London on Christmas Eve. We've finished, we've moved on from the portly gentleman, and then when we finish with the description of London, we get the carol singer. So this is a really key bit here as well. Yeah, just circle it, write it in quite big letters so that you can find this bit again easily if you need. So Scrooge comes upon a carol singer, and he comes to the door of the office, and Scrooge seizes the ruler with such energy that the singer fled in terror. So he seizes, we've got this verb here, again suggesting his violence and aggression. And ultimately, this is the sort of second time that we've seen Scrooge quite angry, really. Firstly, he was angry at his nephew, and now he's angry at the carol singer. So this kind of anger at the world, really, at everybody, sort of seems to wrong him, shows actually that he's a really unhappy man. So, and then the singer flees in terror, and there's quite a sad, really, response on Christmas Eve. Okay, let's go back up, and in fact, you know what, I'm going to stop here, and then I will do a separate video where I look at that paragraph up there, and then we'll move on with the rest of page 6 later. Okay, so I'll cover this bit in a separate